In the past few years, it seems like video games and social politics have intersected, starting out with a rift between gamers and game journalists, and now even a rift between gamers and the developers themselves. The goal of developing a game is no longer just making it great and accessible, but sometimes the goal is to also create a game that doubles as a social statement, apparently. Many companies have been doing this, that is, except for Nintendo, who really gets it right when it comes to representing feminism and females, which I'm all for when done tastefully, and most gamers are as well. But I'll get to that in just a bit. Most recently, fans of the Battelfield franchise were disappointed to see that Battelfield V, a game set during World War II, prominently features a woman as the main character. The trailer for the game received a massive wave of backlash by gamers who feel that featuring a woman at the forefront of a historic event, which involved very few, if any, women on the front lines, was only done in order to cater to a more progressive climate. People made no reservations about their qualms and critiques of this apparently abhorrent trailer and decision by DICE, the developers. All the while, many traditionally progressive outlets called this yet another attack on women and an example of angry, misogynistic gamers who can't stand that games would dare feature a woman in an unconventional role. Now, while I don't care about this nearly as much as many gamers seem to, the annoyance for me and so many others doesn't come from the fact that a woman is featured, but that in this case it was specifically and only done to appeal to a socially feminist climate. Featuring a woman in this way felt incredibly artificial, disingenuous, and shoehorned in. It comes off as the developers trying to score social brownie points in a forced way. It's not only Battlefield V that has gone out of its way to insert as much feminism as possible. The now failed game Battleborn by Gearbox Software had awkwardly inserted voice lines preaching feminism to their players.
All units, be advised, feminism is awesome!
Mass Effect Andromeda pointed out the variance of gender pronouns to be used for one of their in-game races to the player.
I've been using feminine pronouns this entire time. Should I?
On behalf of the Nexus,
in my case, it's fine to
the
continue.
Cultural Center.
Thank you for asking.
Have a look around.
I appreciate it. Some Asari prefer male pronouns, while others gravitate towards gender-neutral where language
who have
allows.
arrived from the military.
My people have several pronouns to identify themselves with.
Even though it somewhat clashed with Mass Effect 2, in which gender wasn't even a thing for that particular race.
We Asari are monogendered, Commander. Male and female do not have any real meaning for us.
Kill me now.
I don't think it's a coincidence that many of these games and even films, which overtly and awkwardly try to insert social justice statements, also end up failing. Standing in contrast to the rest of the gaming industry, however, is Nintendo, which has always been setting trends instead of following them and making statements with their gameplay and consoles rather than politics.
Nintendo, for instance, won't touch politics with a 10-foot Super Mario hammer.
Making political statements are for other people to do. We want people to smile and have fun when they play our games.
However, this doesn't mean that Nintendo hasn't been representing women or even feminism in their games. In fact, they have a better track record of doing this than most other developers. Yet, they have caught none of the flack or backlash from gamers for doing so.
No one said you could touch.
So why is that? Perfectly exemplifying this is Zelda Breath of the Wild, which brilliantly includes themes of feminism and female representation in a tasteful and subtle way instead of with an obnoxious and overt statement. One of the major regions of the game is the Gerdo Desert, and within it is Gerdo Town, inhabited by the Gerdo tribe, which is solely comprised of women, referred to as Vi in their native language. One might describe the inhabitants of Gerdo Town as a caricature of extreme feminism. Any and all men are forbidden to enter the city, and if you try and sneak in, their armed guards will force you out. In order for Link to get in, he must talk to a character named Vilaya, who provides him with the traditional female clothing of the region. Interestingly, in the dialogue, Vilaya responds particularly negatively to being accused of being a man. loosely implying that she might be transgender. This is a very subtle nod to transgender people, yet no one got up in arms about this. No one was upset that Nintendo might have represented trans people in this way, and that's because it felt very natural instead of being forced. Only when Link is cross-dressing is he allowed to enter the town, which also happens to be filled with women from other regions of the game, such as Gorons, Hylians, and Ruto. One might even say this town manages to be a center for diversity within the game. Gerudo Town is also a major trading hub of Hyrule, making it clear that this is no pushover town either. Most of the women, or Vi, inhabiting Gerudo Town are tough and militaristic. Most of them serve as city guards and as protectors of Riju, the chief of the tribe. In contrast to her fellow people, Riju is a young and kind child of the throne who befriends Link on his journey to take down all 4 divine beasts and defeat Ganon. To her right is the captain of the guard, Buliara, who, as her name implies, is a bit of a bully towards Link, and is very protective of the young chief Riju. This contrast between the tough and protective Buliara and the kind and caring Riju highlights the variance between the types of female characters and traits Nintendo is able to create and represent. Once again, Gerudo Town and its people are a strong representation of women and even feminism to an extent. Yet, these elements were portrayed and introduced in a meaningful and functional way, a way that actually adds to the story and depth of the game, rather than just being tacked on and shoved down players' throats by developers who arguably are only doing this to exploit the political climate. But Nintendo didn't stop there. Even Princess Zelda, the character the entire series is named after, has evolved over the franchise's history, and nowhere more prominently than in Breath of the Wild. In contrast to the classic damsel in distress role of a princess, Zelda was actually the one to awaken and, in a sense, save Link from his 100-year slumber at the beginning of the game in order to get his help in defeating Ganon.
Open your eyes. Wake up, Link.
In the backstory to the game, Zelda has been single-handedly fighting off Ganon for the past 100 years while Link was in his slumber. Throughout the story, Zelda's character is also shown to be more independent and strong-willed than in previous games. She's almost more of a mentor, or at least predecessor to Link, than a victim that needs rescue. And these traits are all conveyed through numerous cutscenes and flashbacks with minimal dialogue. Zelda and the Gerudo tribe both portray women in a powerful and respectable role, while also showing more than just one facet of feminine traits, with Riju's kindness as well as Zelda's wisdom and companionship with Link. And on top of all of that, you had the more girly and shy Mipha, who was loved and praised by fans of the game. While Breath of the Wild has a particularly interesting approach to these concepts, presenting these themes doesn't need to be done subtly in order to be tasteful. Once again, Nintendo has some of the most bold representations of females as well, in franchises like Metroid and Bayonetta, yet none of it feels forced or distasteful, and both series are widely adored by fans. This was no accident either. Characters like this were designed in part with representation in mind. In an interview with Kotaku, Shigeru Miyamoto, the godfather of Nintendo franchises, explains their philosophy. He mentions how at first, with Donkey Kong, arcades were never a place that girls went to. Naturally, they catered their games to a male audience as a result. And then he explains how they met the growing demand for female gamers. But typically, with the DS era, what we found is, gradually, more and more women began playing games. Both young girls and adult women playing games like Professor Layton and Animal Crossing, so more and more, even as far back as Mario Kart, we had females who wanted to be able to play as female characters, and we obviously saw the addition of Princess Peach early on in that series. And gradually, over time, we started to see the desire for other balanced female characters, and we've added heavier female characters in the Mario Kart series for them to choose from. So I think it's just a natural tendency. Miyamoto even mentions later on that if we end up creating a gameplay structure where it makes sense for whether it's a female to go rescue a male, or a gay man to rescue a lesbian woman, or a lesbian woman to rescue a gay man, we might take that approach. In Miyamoto's mind, the story and characters must serve the gameplay first. This is what he means by a natural gameplay structure. It doesn't make as much sense to just stick a woman in the protagonist role of a World War II setting for the sake of representation in itself. It comes off as tacky enforced. In many ways, it insults the player's intelligence. It says, look, we need female representation. This is the most blatant way we can do it since gamers can't understand subtlety or story building. So we're just gonna stick it in their face for the sake of diversity and making a statement. I think that's why gamers got annoyed with something like this. Nintendo, on the other hand, has had a different approach to diversity, one that has a track record of always fitting with the gameplay. Nintendo has always been about incorporating men, women, boys, and girls. They've always been the E for everyone developer, and in this politically charged climate, they still reign supreme on delivering just that. A gaming experience that everyone can enjoy.
I am woman, hear me roar, the numbers too big to ignore, and I know too much to go back and pretend, 'cause I've heard it all before, and I've been